Ladies and gentlemen, speakers, distinguished teleaudience, a great day for science and dialogue on this very generous topic of EU Green Deal. I am honored to moderate the conversation today, even if it is quite strange to do it online, but I'm sure we'll make it together with a great panel and great panelists. We'll make all efforts to encourage an interactive and lively discussion and, of course, a candid exchange of views. And we will start with a brief review and opinion of the panelists. But in order to foster the dialogue, we'll take also questions prompted by audience from the live chat. So we encourage you all to help guide us actually through your questions on the subjects that, are of most interest for you. Now, allow me to introduce our great panelists today. We have the honor to have with us Mr. Cristian Bușoi, who is the chair of Committee on Industry, Research and Energy of the European Parliament. Ms. Cristina Verhere, Chief Executive Officer of OMV Petrom. Mr. Andrei Șafar, Country Manager of CEZ Romania. Ms. Anca Dragu, Deputy Director of E.ON Romania and former Minister of Public Finance of Romania, Ms. Corina Popescu, our CEO from Electrica, and Mr. Ivan Hodac, that is not here. Maybe we'll have also the perspective of another industry than energy. So, ladies and gentlemen, basically the Green Deal is about doing Europe climate neutral by 2050. So whatever will happen by 2050 should be the zero carbon is the goal. The Commission proposed raising the EU greenhouse gas emission target for 2030. Today 40%, but the plan is to make it 55%. So by 2030, we need to cut Europe's emissions by up to 55% compared to 1990. Other proposed targets and regulations deriving directly from it, such as 2030 renewable energy target that is currently 32%. We should expect a higher price on CO2. Maybe a new EU industrial strategy and a new EU strategy for offshore wind that leads us to new approach for grid connections and interconnections. At the same time, all these come with a risk that the EU industry to suffering from unfair competition if countries outside Europe aren't pulling their weight on climate change. So let us start. And of course, let's not forget about the most juicy part. We have €1 trillion to be invested in this plan to drive the energy transition and to ensure that it is just. I will start today's conversation with Chair Cristian Bușoi. Mr. Bușoi, the climate is the heart of the EU Commission presidency policy. And how is this subject seen from the European Parliament level? Is this plan to stay, and whatever happens, and whoever is running between now and 2050, zero carbon remains the freest goal?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be again in Bucharest Forum. This year, on the topic of energy, one of the main topics, most important topics now in European policy, and of course the main topic of the committee that I'm chairing since December last year, Industry, Research and Energy Committee in the European Parliament. You asked a very important question, if the target will stay no matter what. I could share with you that yes, the political will is strong again. You know that even before the pandemics, we had a very strong political support in the European Parliament, that not only for this strategic objective in 2050 to decarbonize European economy, European society. Of course, this is not seen only to tackle climate change, but also in order to find opportunities for investment. And even after the pandemic started, and of course, everybody expects economic problems, the political will is very strong again. So the target remains there. And it was reinforced by different resolutions of the European Parliament. Even the vote which took place not so long time ago on the climate change law on the target on 2030 was a reaffirmation of this direction, this strategic direction of Green Deal. Here I would like to just to make a short statement. My personal belief, and this is something that is shared by European People's Party, EPP, the largest political family in the European Parliament. And I understand also it is a position of Romania, was that 60% goal was over-ambitious. I think it's difficult to achieve in terms of jobs and different national starting points. I called in a press statement as not only over-ambitious, but also a little bit populistic. And I believe that it is not really backed by reality. What European Commission proposed, 55%, what was supported also by EPP and also by Romania, was not easy also, not easy, what else was also ambitious, but at least was more feasible. But well, it was a political decision in the European Parliament. Now it will be a negotiation with the Council. My expectation is that finally we'll go versus 55, but still we have to be realistic. Also, I believe that yes, green recovery, what is now the form of Green Deal during the pandemic and what will be in the near future, of course, will give opportunities to unleash innovation, to undertake wider reaching and fundamental restructuring of critical sectors, will give an opportunity to accelerate existing climate ambitions, make use of sustainable energy plans, but in the same time we should not forget that we need a fair transition. Transition should be balanced, should be feasible for all our regions and for all our industrial sectors. We should not lose jobs. By contrary, we should seek to increase the number of jobs. And of course, no sector of industry should be further affected, especially given the COVID-19 economic impact. You mentioned the global competitivity. Even that we see our global competitors making some efforts. Of course, things will depend also on the outcome of the US election result in presidential elections, but there the situation is balanced. And anyway, at the level of states, many achievements were made and many progresses were made. China also made some efforts, but not so much. So it's not enough that EU takes this pathway. It is important that via international energy diplomacy, we should convince others to do it, because otherwise our competitivity will be affected, and we need to maintain our competitivity. That's why I'm advocating for a balanced approach, for feasible solutions, not to be over-enthusiastic, not to go to goals which are very difficult to reach, and also not to jeopardize our economic competitivity and important and key industries. Finally, because I understand that we have maximum 5 minutes for the introductory, and then maybe we'll have some time for question and answers. Of course, this should be backed by climate neutral, highly resource efficient and competitive industrial base in the EU. Of course, Romania will be affected, and it's clear that we need to adapt to this new reality. I believe that we have opportunities in the area of renewables, especially solar and wind, also decarbonized fuels, hydrogen. We are just now opening the discussions, the real discussion, the concrete discussions on this, but on the European arena, and if we look at Germany, for instance, we see that the ambitions are very high, and we also need to build a strategy relating hydrogen. We should use financing opportunities, the Just Transition Fund, in order to solve some problems in the regions depending on coal. So here we should invest wisely, and I see the investment going mainly to alternative in the energy production. Of course, we didn't finish the regulation in European Parliament, but I expect to have a wide range of activities that could be financed via this transition fund. Of course, we could finance many issues, but I would concentrate on energy capabilities of production. And of course, I believe, and I will fight a lot to keep gas as a viable solution for the moment. For the transition period, I don't see another solution for the moment, at least for some problems to be solved. And in 2050, I believe that the technological advancement will give feasible and cheap solutions to decarbonize totally the gas. We are in a situation where many opportunities are coming, but also many challenges. Depends on us to use all the opportunities on new funds, but we will need also investment from national funds and of course private investment, and there we should give to private investors and the companies that are here represented at the highest level by extremely good and energetic leaders, to give them the good incentives and the framework which will build for the next 10-20 years in order to ask for investments and to invest in Romania. Thank you so much, and looking forward for the discussions.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bușoi. I noted here already some really interesting topics that we could touch during our debate. Let's go now to Ms. Cristina Verhere. You represent the biggest Romanian oil and gas producer. One might translate zero carbon in 2050 by zero fossil fuel in 2050. Is this accurate?
Yeah. Great, edgy question, and one I think that's on everybody's mind. And maybe before going into a bit more comments, the one thing I think that we know about the energy sector, if you look back over its more than 100 years contribution, it has the ability to transform itself. Absolutely clear on that, And I think the energy sector overall is embracing this change. I think when you see COVID, some people have said, has COVID changed the plans on climate change and the pace of Green Deal? Has it accelerated it? I would say, actually, I think it has accelerated it. I think it brought its forefront into the conversation. I think in part underpinned by the aspect of funding. And I think this is really important because in the end, it's really important to put a plan in place, execute that plan, and part of that is funding and bringing that forward. So, and this is a sector that's been hit very hard during the pandemic, with regards to drop in demand as well as a drop in commodity prices at the same time of that. But I think it's a sector that's very committed to change and supports the needs, because in the end, this is the need of society. The political arm is coming from the voice of the people saying, actually, we want this change, and in the end, we're all part of the same society. We all have a role to play in that society, and corporations have a big role to play with regards to that. I want to comment on one thing that was said in a prior panel by Mr. Mayet, which actually was about no disruptions of supply during COVID. And I get to say this with my other panelists. There are a lot of people in all our organizations across the energy sector who've worked very, very hard to make sure there's been no disruption in supply. And I think there's a really important reminder of what security of supply means in this transition for that. And all the people working out on the front line today to make sure we have the energy needs of today, as well as getting ready for the energy needs out in 30 years' time, which is what we're talking about. But as I think I mentioned earlier, I think the most important thing is to have a plan. You build the plan, and then you need to execute the plan. And then you learn and adjust as you go with dialogue, debate, new technologies, existing supplies, and come together to do that. I think it's also a plan that needs to be grounded both in economic and competitive aspects as well. And I was very pleased. I think we heard Mr. Kruitsoyo talk about this. We've heard Mr. Buzois talk about it as well. These are really, I think, important aspects, particularly, I think, for Romania. Now, the government has set out its climate change and energy plan. It submitted it to the European Commission and really enables the context of how we move from where we are today in Romania to where we want to get to. And really the big change in energy supply sources that will come in the decades to come, as well as new solutions. So I'm just going to touch on three of those because my colleagues will touch on other ones too on the panel. So I want to talk about the role of gas. I think this is very important for Romania. But I also want to touch on fuels and as well as energy efficiency, because I think this is another important topic that sometimes doesn't get maybe as much profile as I think it should. But let's talk about gas and its role in the energy transition. I think we've heard others talk about it. I'm very pleased to hear that others are talking about it, because what we do see globally is that the demand for gas will continue to grow, especially in emerging economies that are looking to match their growing demand for energy with the displacement of coal. And I think it is the lowest carbon footprint of the fossil fuels, and therefore has definitely a role to play in this energy transition. It's a really, really important resource for Romania, given the potential in the Black Sea. It can support the climate change agenda, but also supporting the economic agenda of Romania. And the ability to see these two come together, I think, is fundamental. It also underpins energy security. Right now, Romania has become a net importer of gas. And without the development of the Black Sea, analysis shows that this could grow to being as much as 40% in the next 5 years. So I think under energy security, this is a really important aspect of it. It has versatility as well. Yes, we think of it mainly for heat as well as for power generation as well. We think the power generation side can grow, but I think it can also play a role with biogas in transportation and then the conversations that are going on with regards to blue hydrogen. So I think it has some versatility as well as we keep looking at the new technological solutions. On fuels, we do see the transition clearly happening in the Romanian market. We think it will go slower than in Western Europe. In part driven by the car fleet and how we see the car fleet that. We do see fuel demand growing in Romania, fundamentally underpinned by economic prosperity, fundamentally been underpinned by new infrastructure and roads being built. By that, and also not just on the residential and sort of commercial side, but actually on the transportation side of that with the infrastructure. But what we also will see is the pace of which the e-vehicle infrastructure can come into the country. We've started installing and will install 40 e-vehicle chargers in 40 filling stations this year in a venture with an LX. So we're getting ready to be able to increase the diversity of customer that we will see in our filling stations. In addition, on the fuel side, we're looking at the bio component, right? Both biofuels as well as co-processing as a biogenic feedstocks. And in addition, on the fuel side, the gas as in the role of transportation with regards to CNG and LNG. So again, that's some of the other aspects that bring in the versatility of gas into the conversation. And then on the supply mix, maybe I'll just touch a little bit on energy efficiency, because I think this is a real potential in Romania. Partly, unfortunately, because of the starting point when we look at this. So I think what we can see here is, one, increasing the awareness of people in how they use energy. It's really important because this isn't just a corporate issue or political issue, it's a societal issue. So it will take all of us, including how we use energy. The other aspect, and so we're started to work through a program called Romania Eficientă with regards to the reduction of this and focus on education and awareness. And therefore, we're going to do that through schools. And the reason we do that through schools is when you educate children, you educate their parents. You also educate the next generation coming through. The other area that we're working on in this program actually is around what will it take to improve the energy efficiencies of some of the municipality buildings. And we're going to start with schools. What does it take to improve that? Because in the end, this is part of the infrastructure of Romania and is the municipality buildings. And we want to be able to show some mayors this is what it can take to do it, so they can then do it on their own as well. So again, I think we shouldn't lose sight of the energy efficiency conversation in this. I'll just add two more comments and I'll close and pass on to my colleagues. The ability to execute the plan.
To come back.
Yeah, execute the plan, legislative changes, access to EU funding, and role of the private sector. These are three places that we can talk more on. And then I'll just close with one thing. The energy sector has a deep and long history in Romania. Huge. Yeah, and it's been the backbone of Romania. It really has. And it is still today. It makes up 50% of the Bucharest Stock Exchange of the energy companies. And a major transition is happening. And I fundamentally believe the energy sector will still remain a very, very important backbone of the Romanian economy going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well noted, and yeah, very, very well summarized in a few points. Just some directions that must be taken into consideration. And of course, I totally agree on the fact that energy efficiency is something that we should talk about more when it comes about plans and so on. So, Mr. Shafar, ČEZ has in its extensive portfolio classic power generation, renewable, operating also an important high voltage grid, and so on. Until the Green Deal will be a friend for the economy and the society, it will be first of all for the industry. How do you cope with the Green Deal policies?
So, thank you for invitation to this panel, first of all. And regarding the Green Deal and the challenges, I have to say that from the energy sector, like the first direction, first milestone, and the start of the journey, I see some like with the targets 2020. That was the first experience where the European countries, they set up some targets. And there was early as well a lot of discussions, whether it's achievable, how is it achievable, and so on. And in Romania, the process started, and although it looked really very, very challenging at the beginning, in 2015, the targets were pretty much achieved. So the things are like, if there is a direction, if there is a proper legislation in place, we could see on the experience that there is huge potential in Romania when it comes to renewables. And the things can be, once the things start to move in the right direction, things can be easier than you might expect. And this is where we were really a significant part of the success of Romania in achieving the targets for 2020. So with our wind farm, and I think that it's really achievable, even the further targets. What's important is really to decide on the directions, to set the proper framework in place, and to start to work on it, and the things can be achieved. Then there will be second milestones, which is going to be the milestones for 2030, where it's going to be, especially for the Romanian market, it will be a big challenge, because it will be really about the real transformation, about from the current generation, where there is a various mixture, where the coal is playing a very important role. And if Romania, especially in the midterm, doesn't find a proper solution how to replace the generation capacity from the coal, it might make Romania very expensive. And the costs for the generation from the coal might be far more expensive than any support and any cost which can be Romania facing based on the transformation into becoming green. Because really, and we were facing it before the COVID situation, we were facing very expensive prices in Romania, which was mainly driven by the coal generation. Romania was one of the most expensive markets in Europe. Now we have, I would say, because I have always tendency to see the positive things. So I can see that like now the current situation with COVID gave Romania some time to really think and prepare, because the consumption slightly decreased, which is followed by the decrease of the prices and the need for the coal generation. So now it's giving Romania really time to somehow rethink, to restructure, and it will be important for the milestone 2030 to invest massively into the network, both Transelectrica, transmission network, to invest massively into distribution network, because our distribution network needs to get ready for the distributed generation, for the small generation, where more and more people will start to generate the electricity by themselves. We are starting to see it now, where we have really on daily basis. We have tens of customers coming with the application for the own generation. We are starting to see the industries as well looking into these solutions and investing in these solutions. So it will be very important. Romania will need to invest in the generation capacity to replace the coal. And Romania will need to invest in the balancing capacity because more renewables means less predictability. So it needs the balancing power. And all of these things, it will be necessary to be implemented for 2030. And if these things are really happening, it will be very good basis for the next milestone, which is going to be 2050. So if these things are well framed, well set up for the 2030 milestone, it will be really more. It will be much easier for Romania to achieve the targets 2050. And all of this, what's important is that all of those things they should be done with taking into view the cost of the transformation, because these things might cost something, and this is where I see where we see the role of European funds. So the European funds should be the tool which is going to help us to go through this transformation with a reasonable, acceptable cost for the users. So, and this is something what we are looking for many years for opportunities how to invest with the usage of the European funds. So until now, we attracted almost 40 million euro into our network. So we are investing into our network. We are investing in the digitalization of the network, mainly using the European funds. Otherwise, the needs of the money will have a huge impact on the end user prices, and this is something what it's important for us to avoid it, to make it really in the acceptable way for the end users.
So using smartly and wisely the European money is something that it's only in our hands somehow.
Yes.
Ms. Corina Popescu, Mr. Șafar already touched some points on the next topic, but could you share with us the Romanian and regional basically dimension from the perspective of a distribution grid operator that must absorb all these concepts of renewable, prosumers, distributed electricity, intelligent power grid, renewable integration, and so on and so forth?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And I think such debate about Green Deal are very necessary in Romania, because now everybody, I get the feeling that everybody speaks about greenfield, but I think the perception are completely different. And it's better for us to understand what are necessary to be done in order to reach our target, how we need to do all those, because we don't have a nice history. If I'm looking what's happened in the past with the renewable green schemes, and how we can treat and which will be the mechanism that this concept will be acceptable and will be cost efficient. Because, you know, all the state members start in this transition process from different states. And all the mechanisms need to be defined in order to have to have a fair transition. Coming back to your question, Christian, because you asked me what means this Green Deal from a distribution perspective. So it would be a very good opportunity for distributors, because in the past, the distribution has very few role from security of supply. Now, in the view of the Green Deal, the distribution starts to become an active role in the security of supply, because we speak about the distributed production, we need to speak about renewables, but not large scale, small scale. We speak about distributors which can be an aggregator. We need to speak in the new view that the customer can have a new active role in order to balance the system. So everything it is more dynamic. You need to implement such IT system in order to make face to all those challenges. And all the investment that need to be done need to be more efficient and need to address everything that are linked with smart technology. It's necessary to have another strong link between TSO and DSO, because now the role of TSO and DSO are merged. And speaking about this, at Europe level, starting with next year, we'll have an DSO association which are defined the same on the same principle like the TSO association, like NSOE, and they start to define the same rule for all the European countries. They need to more or less align for have a fair transition, the rule at the DSO level, and also need to define the interaction between the DSO and TSO. And which I think is important, and maybe will be a role like looking to Anka to align the energy taxation. And I give also this subject for Anka to thinking, because having different rules at each member state, we cannot speak about a fair transition in order to implement the, because at the end of the day, what is Green Deal for Europe? We need to have actually to enable cost-efficient emission reduction in the energy sector, leading to full carbon neutrality by 2050, while ensuring security of supply, competitive energy price, and the last but not the least, the social acceptance, because this is also something that Romania needs to address in the next period of time. How will protect the vulnerable customer? Have in mind this huge investment that needs to be done in order to fulfill all the targets for 2030 first and 2050 on the long term.
Thank you very much. Yeah, social acceptance is another topic that we must discuss. So coming back a little bit to your introduction in the topic, you speak about the smartification of the grid. And if we are to pass to Ms. Sanca Dragu, if we check the website of E.ON, we see E.ON home gas, home electric, green home, solar home, e-mobility. Are these new concepts embracing the Green Deal from the consumer perspective?
Yes, so these are this is the commitment of E.ON that we want to contribute to a greener planet. And we, E.ON Group, also E.ON in Romania, we are firmly supporting the European Commission objectives for 2030, for 2050 also. We want to reduce emissions, and we can directly influence and become climate neutral by 2040. In Romania, we have consistently supplied over the last few years approximately 40% of the energy from renewable energy sources. And we have contributed, therefore, to
achieving this nationwide target for CO2. This is not a surprise when you open our website and you see this green projects. And yes, of course, we're also interested in the smartification, as Corina mentioned, and we get significant amounts of money. I think we have like around 170 million lei in EU funds over the last few years for such projects, and we do not stop here. But to tell you a little bit more about our project, we have this E.ON solar home that you saw on our website. And this is the project for individuals. It's a complete solution for photovoltaic panels, through which the consumer becomes also a small producer of green energy. And Corina was mentioning this aggregation possibility by the new legislation. So consumers will reduce the energy bill, but also we will protect the environment. And PVs can provide up to 70% of the amount of energy needed by a household. So this would be a much wiser alternative of many gas projects. Yeah. We are also contributing to this energy efficiency concept and carbon reduction through other projects like smart lighting projects for villages and for industrial users. For industrial users, we have 18 intelligent lighting projects with LED technology. For industrial, logistics, and storage and office spaces. And through these projects, carbon emissions were reduced by 880 tons per year. And the lighting economy was between 50 to 60% of the consumption replaced by such systems. We have, as I mentioned, a good cooperation with administrative units, with villages. We have the smart village concept we signed contracts with 27 villages in different areas of the country. Also for installing their smart lighting with LED technology that will result in reducing the bill, but also in reducing the CO2 footprint. We are also an important partner for electric mobility, and we are offering these solutions. We are a part actually of the next E-project. It's a European project. It's financed through grants from the European Union. And we have already installed 18 fully functional fast charging stations. And the last one, the 19th one, we hope to have it installed really soon. So as I said, we are really committed to this medium-term and long-term objective. And very important how we contribute to this EU project. Maybe we saw that we have the CFO of the group, who is now a member of this platform that launched by the European Commission of specialists looking at the EU taxonomy in the new Green Deal. So they are looking at solutions of which industries are considered green industries, which industries should be somehow remunerated or penalized for not being as green as necessary.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we run out of time, so we need to open a little bit the panel. So for the audience, please feel free to ask your questions and use the live chat. We'll have another 5 or 7 minutes by the end of this panel. I'd like to ask some questions, and I would prefer some very, very short and brief answers, because there are many things to be still to be discussed on this subject. Actually, it is very hard to compress such a large subject in a 45-minute debate. It's somehow funny, the fact that the climate crisis came from a very steep industrial growth, and now we are planning to invest 1 trillion in order to encourage our industry to change, and we speak about new jobs, and we speak about new technologies and so on. If we are to see ourselves in 2030, what would one notice to be the main difference from the sector as it is seen today? So what would be those things that will immediately appear as a game changer if we would be in 2030? What do you think, Ms. Verheere?
A lot of gas out of the Black Sea and the economic prosperity that will bring. It's short, it's sweet. And I think that you will just continue to see the intensity of this conversation growing and progress and tracking of it, because 2030 is just one step in the timeline. So, but gas from the Black Sea, I think, would be the most visible thing that we should see, and before 2030 for sure on that. But that would be one. So, and I think, Romania embracing this change. It has a very innovative culture. It has a very dynamic entrepreneurial culture, and we should tap into this as we go through this transition.
Mr. Shafar, what about 2050? What would be the most disruptive thing that we'll notice, comparing to, of course, today's situation?
I think the most disruptive will be the role of the customers, and it will be our role. So customers will be far more in the center. Customers will be far more the one who will generate its power for its own consumption. And us as a companies, as energy companies, will be far more like closer to the customers as a service provider. And that's going to be for us really a huge challenge to support the customers in this transformation, because now the situation is very different. Customers is just turning on and off the light, and we should do everything around it. And we need to bring the customer this situation. We need to help them to be more in the center of the area of the energy sector.
For Ms. Drago and Ms. Popescu, as you were also former members of the Romanian government or directly in charge with the regulations and so on, it was that constant feeling in Romania somehow that during the past years we lost some opportunities, like the EU funds and so on. What do you think it needs to be done in order to benefit most from the recovery fund and the just transition fund? And if you would have the opportunity to speak directly with the chairman of the Committee of Industry, Research and Energy of the Industrial Parliament, what would be the key message that you would like to pass to that house in order to consider that they are driving us to a just transition?
You keep the hardest question at the end, Christian.
I have some.
So, I think for Romania, there are a lot of opportunities in the next period of time. What is very important is that the message that we send it out as a sector, Romanian energy sector, is that we intend to develop all the mechanisms which are market-based. Our investment need to be cost efficient, and already Andre mentioned, the protection for vulnerable customers is something that will be realized with fair and transparent mechanism, and not using like in the past regulated market or other kind of mechanism. I speak now about some governmental decision issuing for Hunedoara and Oltenia or other kind of mechanisms that are not linked with the principle of the marketplace.
Okay, sounds like we have a plan. So in 2030, we'll have a lot of gas in Romania. In 2050, the consumer will be in the cornerstone of the system. And meantime, Mr. Bușoi will ensure us that this transition will be socially acceptable by the vulnerable consumer. The last question for Mr. Bușoi. Zero carbon by 2050 again means a new industrial revolution, basically. From the dialogue with the industry and with the research institutes and with the university, what do you consider to be the main obstacles of the industry, and what would be the plan to overcome them when we speak about the Green Deal perspective?
Well, economic crisis, it's for clear an obstacle, but it will be passed in few years. And maybe the leaders of European Commission are right. If we have so much money to invest in order to recover our economies, it is better to invest in new and clean technologies and technologies of the future than to spend money on the old technologies. And we'll see what will be the impact. Of course, Green Deal is not only about energy. In energy, hard decisions should be taken in some European countries, in Romania and Poland, to phase out the carbon. If you asked about 2030, I see the carbon phased out and more electric cars in Romania, and new investments in renewables, but also new capacities for gas, and of course the consumer more empowered and with more influence on decisions. And in 2050, I really believe that we should be carbon neutral. But it's not only about energy sector, it's also about agriculture, and their transformation should be made. And the heavy industry, there without carbon adjustment tax and without other instruments in order to protect the competitivity of our industry, it will be extremely difficult. The main obstacle will be the will of policymakers and the will of people, because it will not be easy. It will not be easy. We have to keep the cost affordable, social accepted, as you said, but we also need to from the strategic point of view, to assure the security of supply. Here, Green Deal looks that will reduce our dependency on different players outside European Union. But let's see if we should also achieve this. I really believe that we achieve this goal, but do not forget that we should not force too much, because otherwise it could become as a boomerang and lose what it is really support from citizens and from the young generation to see a total transformation for our future, for the future generation, for our planet, and for a better life for us.
Thank you very much. So we'll end in this tone. The future sounds bright and clean. Thank you very much to all of you for participating. But in order to speak about the future, we need also to focus on the present. So let's go back to our agenda of today. And let's make sure that we do the correct things in the present in order to speak about that bright future of the 2050 that I hardly wait. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.